Thanks again to Voyager and Starlab, and it's almost like we planned that. We're going to go into our next segment. Really excited about this one. We're really fortunate to have with us today a couple people for a great talk. So we've got Alan Cutler, who's the CEO of the Coalition for Deep Space Exploration. And sitting with him and talking with him is Clay Mowry, the CEO of AIAA. So gentlemen, come on down, take your seats, and we'll get going. Excellent.
No table to behind here.
Oh, I wish I had one. Well, I mean, here, let's just start out. I mean, it says it's a fireside chat, so we'll get the campfire going here, and we'll have some talking. I'm Alan Cutler. As I said, I'm President and CEO of the Coalition for Deep Space Exploration. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the organization, I deal with everything from the small mom and pops all the way to the big integrators up and down the supply chain with the Artemis program. We're out there, we're advocating for the program and for a good political and stable environment for our companies to be able to operate and make this mission possible. But that's that. And in terms of background, I've been there in the position for about 3 years. And prior to that, I spent a little bit of time on Capitol Hill writing spending bills that covered NASA, National Science Foundation, some other cats and dogs. Short intro. Clay, tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks, Alan. It's great to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, AIAA. I've been in that role for about a year. Prior to that, I worked in commercial space sector for almost 30 years. More recently, Voyager Technologies, was advisor to VAST, was at Blue Origin for about 5 years, and before that with Ariane Space for quite a long time. So I did a lot in the launch sector, and before that I ran the Satellite Industry Association. But it's great to be at AIAA, have a look at this top down. We have over 35,000 engineers, 95 corporate members. We represent engineers across the world, but mostly in the United States. The vast majority of our memberships here in the United States. We got a great section here in Huntsville.
No, absolutely, and it's great to be here. It's great to be here at the Symposium. Huntsville always been a great player in the space world from the get-go, so it's great to be here. I think it says this is an industry outlook and fireside chat. Industry outlook. I think it's really difficult to have this conversation without having a bit of a overview of where are we now, and that's a complicated issue. I mean, we look at the auditorium here today. A lot of our NASA friends aren't able to be here with us. We are now into day 29 of a government shutdown, a lapse in funding. The House hasn't been in session for 40 days. Kind of biblical, if you will. And but you look at it and say, here's where we are. This is the situation we're in, and how do we as an industry, how do we cope with these sort of things? And I think even before you get to literally this morning when you woke up and said, okay, here's where we are. The kickoff for this fiscal for the year, a lot of times is the president's budget when it rolls out, and at that point we had coming out of the CR for 24, where NASA was funded at around $25 billion. And then we had a request that came in at 18.8. It was a $6 billion decrease. I mean, that's a significant cut. And there were a lot of programs that were slated for, or at least proposed, it's a proposal from the president, that they come in and kind of reorganize some things. Now, if you're from an exploration standpoint in the human world, the budget wasn't quite as bad. There were certainly some policies in there that may have people have disagreements with, but from a dollar standpoint and from a priority, it was there. So that's a nice thing. And then we just kind of move through the calendar. You get from there to the House and Senate appropriations bills. What do they have to say? Well, they came back and basically put NASA on a financial number that was on par with where they were, not 18.8, closer to 25 billion. And then you get into the details, some things were higher or lower and that sort of thing, but from a congressional standpoint, the signal coming from Congress was, we think NASA's at least as important as it has been. We're not in the business, we don't want to sit there and reduce. Well, that's great, those bills are out there, but where are they? They haven't moved yet. So it's an environment where you come in and say, okay, what do we do? Oh, and then we have our authorizing friends, and we cannot forget them because absolutely, when reconciliation came through, the big beautiful bill, if you will, but the reconciliation bill threw $10 billion into the exploration program, and nobody said anything negative about that. Nobody even touched it. There wasn't an amendment to try and move money around. Clearly, the Congress is in a different place in terms of where the priorities are. And so here we are in a position of a lapse in funding. The money that came from reconciliation, some of that spent in fiscal year 26 it's mandatory money. It's not discretionary. It can't just be turned off. It's like Social Security. It's there. That money is slated to go out at some point for these programs in certain fiscal years. So it's a very complicated fiscal environment for all of you, because when you're talking about an industry outlook, like, okay, well, what signal are we getting? And there's a lot of noise, and it is tough. I think I'll kind of move off this because I'm sure there'll be questions and it'll be fun. But I do think that, as you're looking at where we're going forward, you do have to understand, here's where we are, what's going on, and how is that going to impact the future. But I have a little wedge of NASA that I look at from my organization's perspective. Clay, you've got a whole lot more. So really, what do you?
Yeah, no, I think broadly, and it's been talked about a lot the last couple of days, but there's clearly misalignment between what Congress wants to fund with respect to space, but not just space, by the way. We're looking at programs that in the Department of War, at the Federal Aviation Administration, others, where we need to overhaul the air traffic control system. We're looking at Golden Dome. We're looking at a lot of other priorities that are out there, and there's some misalignment with respect to the priorities that Congress has and what the White House and OMB want to lay down. And I think best case right now, we're looking at CR, either through the end of the year or maybe all the way through to December of next year, which a lot of people are reporting. Now, CR sounds like, okay, well, then the budget just keeps going, but it actually erodes because you're not keeping pace with inflation. There's not a lot on the authorization side, and even on the appropriation side, there's not a lot of direction on some of these programs and spending priorities. We get handicapped in a lot of places because it does not allow for some things like new program starts and some other things that create innovation, drive programs forward. And I think, as the panel before us said, there's a lot of private capital that flows into this sector. And maybe just if I could set the stage for a second, which is we are now in a very different place than we were 10 years ago in space. This industry we're in right now, commercial has overtaken government in a lot of ways. We now have over 10,000 operational commercial satellites in orbit, far outpacing. Most of those are SpaceX, Starlink, okay, but 10 years from now, we're going to have over 50,000 satellites in orbit. We're going to have commercial space stations. We're going to have commercial missions all over the moon and hopefully on Mars. These things are driving a very different ecosystem, and the phrase was used before. But, okay, here we are sitting at the University of Alabama. We have companies that are sponsoring this event, Marshall Space Flight Center, the engineers of the future coming out of these universities, a lot of programs and the research that's happening flows into the companies. Those companies look at both commercial and government as customers. That is the ecosystem we live in, and now we're in a place where it's going to be very challenging, right, for that. Roughly $50 billion of private capital has flowed into our commercial space sector in the last 5 years, according to Bryce. Created over 530 new companies. Something like 1,800 individual investors are now investing in space. It's a very different place than we were 10 years ago. Now, the government still plays a huge role in that, right, in terms of directing and programming and where those investments are going. Because most of these commercial space companies, where they may start out with a commercial market, they also heavily look at the government as a key customer, as an anchor customer, as a lead customer, particularly in markets like the moon and Mars and other places where we're trying to go and start a commercial space sector. So there's a huge impact from the budgetary standpoint, huge impact on the workforce, huge impact on the companies that supply the services that increasingly the government's buying as a service, space as a service, not as the old model of cost plus contracting. So it has impacts across the board, both the programs of record and the new starts.
No, and I think those are absolutely great points. And as I think about some of the things that you were saying in terms of direction and where things are going, as I look at from the Artemis program standpoint, like here we have some programs that have been in place for a number of years, and here we are in as early as February, going to be launching a crew up and around the moon, and that in and of itself is a great thing, but it only gets us there. So it gets us so far. Here we are. We just like no doubt that this is going to be a successful mission. We saw Artemis 1 was a great success. There was a lot of things that came out of that. Here we are at Artemis 2. But to your point about the workforce, here we have this environment we're in where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of churn. We heard from the panel last night about what happens with these companies who are working, maybe they're working on programs with the government that are accepted, much like Artemis is, but these companies may be starting to work at risk. They may be, like the funding, NASA may have forward funded as much as they could before the shutdown happened. Their money's going out the door. It's gonna stop at some point. And how do you manage that? And we had a call, and this was back during the reconciliation was going on, and I had my members on, and we had a call with the committee office, and they wanted to hear, well, what was the impact of just the proposal? We haven't even gotten into this situation yet. This was just, here's the idea. And they were talking about, well, if Artemis 4 and 5 are going away as proposed, and we as a company, our work is done, we're working on 4, 5, 6 missions beyond, our employees are wondering, what are we gonna do? Manager of program says, well, if this is going away, I need to go find a different job. This was just at the suggestion of a policy change. I mean, that was then. Now we go fast forward to today, and you look at the workforce. If you were a Fed, if you were working at NASA, this would be a really tough place to be. You're looking at a month now of sitting at home. You've cleaned out your closet. You've done all the small projects you could possibly think of. Everything's organized now. And now we're getting to these doldrums, and you're now hitting that first month where you're not getting a paycheck. Okay, that's going to be tough, especially if you've got households where you have multiple, both of the income earners are federal employees. Things are going to start getting stretched. So if you're working at one of these agencies, or NASA or any of them, you see this environment. What makes you think that October of next year is going to be any different? Are we just going to do this again? How enthusiastic are you? I mean, that's tough. No, and that's the feds. Now you've got the companies, and they're trying to balance out. I mean, we heard this from the CLIPS guys on Monday. Actually, they were talking about stability in the supply chain and having consistency. That's what all companies want, right? You want to be able to predict what's coming so you can right-size your workforce, get your materials orders in, do all those things that you need to do. And how do you plan in this environment? No one has any idea where this is going to end up. Hopefully at some point, no, let's do a CR through near term.
And I would just say on top of the budget issues, a lot of our members are looking at supply chain issues, and the supply chain issues, of course, are tied to sourcing of materials that are space qualified or aero qualified, right? That you're talking about people's lives oftentimes that are in the balance of having reliable, capable, certified components that you can fly with. And so now with the tariff situation, it's very difficult. In a lot of these cases, there's only 1 or 2 sources in the world for the qualified component you want to fly on your plane or on your rocket ship or what you're putting together. And so it's created a lot of uncertainty for a lot of the companies I'm talking to. They're not sure how, in the short term, they can do that. They can buy forward, they can source, But now that we're 9 months into this, 10 months into this new era with uncertainty in trade, now we're very happy to see all these trade agreements are starting to roll out country by country because that at least provides some certainty in terms of supply. But in other cases, it's very challenging for, I think, the companies to figure out, where do I source the aluminum, or where do I source the fastener or the parts, some of the very basic components where there's only a couple of suppliers in the world that may be qualified to provide that. And vertical integration is great for a lot of companies, but it's also a huge challenge, I think. Add on to the budget uncertainty, some of the supply chain uncertainty, and you've got an interesting mix for companies that are trying to build hardware.
No, absolutely. And I think, this was something when Senate Commerce Committee had a hearing at the beginning of September, and I think one of the questions that we had from one of the senators asked the question was like, well, is the environment that we're in right now having impacts? And and I'll play to the hometown crowd here because we're in the Rocket City. But one of the things that I said was, yes, this is going to have an impact, but because of that uncertainty, I'd much rather have people working on rockets instead of their resumes. I mean, we are in a place right now of having this Artemis II mission coming forward, and you have an uncertain environment, and you're injecting risk into a mission that doesn't need to have that there. You have distracted people, and this is a tough place to be. You're like, you want them to be focused on, we want to have this mission be as safe as possible. We want to make sure we're not making any mistakes along the way. Oh, but by the way, you're coming to work and not getting paid. I mean, I know people who've changed their LinkedIn status for their new job as volunteer. And it's funny, but it's like, no, I remember being on the Hill. Same thing. It was like, I was there. I was doing spending bills when the shutdown happened last time around. It was 35 days. Started at Christmas, and around Christmas time went after. I was showing up for 12-hour days, and I wasn't getting paid. I was happy holidays to me. I mean, this is the reality that people are working with, and companies are having to, like you said, on top of sourcing their materials, how do you get your stuff built? How do you manage your workforce? How do you deal with all of the challenges that normally are there, and then add this layer on top of it? It is a tough place. But going forward, are there any signals that you're seeing coming out of either business from your companies or from NASA or other agencies about the kind of give? I want this to be like a downer of a fireside, but really, like, what are those signals about going forward? Like, what are those things that, like, what gives us hope? What gives your people, the folks in your organization, some hope?
Well, I think that this is, I think are we yet at the record? Are we at the record yet for shutdown? Not yet. We're almost there. Okay. So, look, I think going forward, at some point this will turn. We're going to get at least a CR, and we'll see what the distance of that CR is going forward. We'll start to energize. In the near term, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult for the workforce. It's difficult for the federal government employees. It's difficult for the contractors. I think that we all see that it won't last forever. That Congress will at some point get back involved and re-engage in this. A lot of people point to the Thanksgiving holiday as probably the breaking point, whereas if the air traffic control system, if people don't show up for work, nobody's going home for Thanksgiving. That'll have a huge impact, right? I think that, you start to think about some of those things and the impact. There's obviously a game of brinkmanship going on right now between the two parties on the Hill and what they think is going to happen. But ultimately, I think we're going to break through this and we'll move forward. For me, the bigger concern is that if we do just do a CR through the rest of, say it goes out to December of 2026, which is an interesting thought, that actually does not just keep things stable, it erodes, because when you look at it versus inflation, you look at it versus new program starts and innovation and where we want to take America and our industry, it's a much more challenging environment for folks. So there's going to be a lot of belt tightening, I think, overall. But, better to have funding, and at least we know what that funding can look like for continue through the midterms of next year. I think that's a positive note. And as you say, if you're in the human exploration field, good things. If you're in the missile defense area, so these are two keys, by the way, for here in Huntsville, those are actually great trends. So good news, I think, on that is there's a lot of signals coming out of this administration that are positive with respect to American leadership. I was at the IAC in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. I had the opportunity to interview Secretary and Acting Administrator Sean Duffy, and he's very charged up about trying to get us back to the moon, about getting onto Mars and doing all the things that NASA is famous for doing in terms of exploration. And so those are great things to see, and great to see that there's leadership coming out of the administration to want to do those things and to be honest, to beat China back to the lunar surface. And so we'll see how quickly can we do that. A lot of debate right now over those programs and where we're headed, but I think that's a good thing, right? You're seeing focus at a very high level in the administration about trying to achieve those goals.
No, absolutely. I don't know where we are on time or where Jim is, but it's like, I don't.
5 minutes? Are there audience questions?
I guess we can probably ask if there's any questions. I mean, we could just sit here and talk all day, but it's not really a.
So you guys have talked about the ecosystem and about playing to the home crowd. Things have changed over the last 10 years, and the industry versus the government capabilities have changed a little bit. And I think NASA has somewhat struggled with how do they best offer their capabilities back to the industry. Do you have any ideas about, is there a new model? Is there an FFRDC? Is there something different that NASA could do to help keep this industry growing?
Let me just start with maybe just a little bit of history, right? When the shuttle program was ended, and what the impact that had at KSC and on the Florida economy. And now you see a huge resurgence down there, right? In not just the programs, but the investment by private investors and companies, the growth in manufacturing at the Space Coast, which was not, it was always a place where we launched from, but it wasn't a place where that we actually built hardware, right? Which is amazing to see down there. And so there's a bit of that creative destruction going on, right? When you end one of these big programs, decadal program or multi-decadal program, right? 20 so odd years, maybe almost 30 years from inception through execution. There's a lot going on there. Now, that was an interesting model. And you talked to Bob Cabana and others about kind of how did they do that. You can go back and look on NASA Ames and some of the things that they did to create startups that flowed through that system. I think there's a ton of great know-how that comes out of NASA to tap into that. And CLDs are by the way, a good example of that, where NASA's really helping, Johnson Space is really helping those companies to understand what's in front of them and what they're doing. So a huge amount of know-how that can come through NASA. I think some of the approaches in terms of making facilities open for companies and innovation to happen at NASA centers or around NASA centers is a huge piece of that. So information flow, and then in comfort, and by the way, in sponsoring and encouraging some of those activities. So there's a bit of a, it's not invented here. I have to keep it inside the house and protect our programs. So a bit of a psychology to change that has to take place amongst a lot of the NASA centers to be able to create that, help foster that innovation that's taking place in partnership. The strength of the public-private partnership, I think, is huge. And Phil McAllister was speaking yesterday. I teach a class on space business. Phil comes and talks, and he talks about COTS and CRS and CCDev and a lot of these great programs that were started, and the mindset that had to change at NASA around that, about how to buy those types of services. Where does NASA play in it? Give guidance, but not too much into there, and then allow those programs to take hold and innovate. So there's a bit of a psychology piece of this around, the NASA centers and NASA programming, but I think there's a lot there. It's shown, right, the return on that invested capital and the bringing in private capital to supplement NASA as a government customer. It's huge returns. And Minister Braun said you were part of that. And so I think there's a ton there, if you can use that as kind of a rule of thumb, to open up the minds and open up the centers and open up the know-how. There's a lot that can come out of this. I think that's really positive for the American space industry.
No, absolutely. I think as you look forward, NASA has an insane amount of tools that it can use at its disposal. The contracting authorities, there are different vehicles that they can use to encourage activities, can run the gamut of, they can be very creative. The ability has been there, and it's been there for a long time. I think one of the things you have to look at is how you're managing your risk. Certainly, if you've got some really early TRL type activities, that may require a certain type of approach, whereas there's maybe some more mature activities. Go for it. We've spent decades as a country investing in the space program and the intellectual property collectively. I mean, these companies that we talk about today that didn't exist just a few years ago are able to be here because we as a country invested for a long time to have that capability. And they reach in and they grab folks at NASA, they hire folks at NASA, they pick their brains. It's nice to have them there. But to do that, and I think, you know, as we're going forward, you know, those opportunities to grow and take that knowledge base, I want to call it, it's like a national resource almost that we've developed, and be able to take that and turn it into not only things that accomplish our national goals, but then also are able to promote such a bright and vibrant space economy that's just keeps finding new ways to grow. And I think it's those opportunities are there.
We'll do one more way back on the top left.
Fellow recovering appropriator here. I was in middle school the last time we passed all the appropriations bills on time. December of 26, CR seems like a massive abdication of congressional authority. Do you think that they will inflict that self-inflicted wound?
I'm sorry, the microphone's not working. I didn't hear that question. Oh, I hope not. I mean, this is, I'll take my corporate hat off and put my appropriator hat back on and just say, like, I'm a big fan of Article 1. I think Congress has a responsibility in a lot of places where they just have not chosen to take it. I think while a CR through December of 26 does kick a lot of problems down the road, and you don't have to go through another, are we shutting down, are we not shutting down when we hit October 1st again of next year? Sure, that's a really convenient thing, but as Clay talked about, there's activities that cannot happen under a CR. There's no new starts, all these things that may be, and that's not just NASA, it's government-wide. I mean, there's a lot of that, so that would be a problem. So I honestly hope that's not the case. It'd be really nice if they did something short. I think there's some talk about something maybe January. I mean, November 21st is pretty close, so it's probably not the best deadline anymore, but give them a deadline. I mean, it's not my world anymore, but if it were me, I'd say, I'd want to see something where you'd say, here, you've got through middle of January, we'll CR through this. Appropriators, get whatever deals you can cut done on whatever bills you can, and anybody who can't get their bill across the finish line, full year CR. And, you know, hang that over their heads and just do that just to move things along. But yeah, no, I think going that far out would be, it solves a near-term problem, but it does not help us in the long term as a country.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to that, but you know, I maybe just let me say that generally stasis is not a great thing, right? It's not gonna get us a dynamic space economy. It's not gonna continue U.S. leadership. It's not gonna really foster U.S. innovation if we just keep on with the same kind of thing, and again, losing ground to inflation. So I think we want to see and encourage Congress to do their job, and we want to see an active budget process, and we want to see that debate and go through. And so, yeah, I hope for the best.
Big round of applause for Alan and Clay.
Do I need it? All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Cameron Rodewald. I'm an undergraduate student here at UAH, and I'm majoring in mechanical engineering. I'm originally from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is about like 30 minutes south of Nashville. I'm looking forward to going into a career in something electric propulsion based. We're now going to take a break with snacks and beverages outside. Your challenge for this networking break, though, is to introduce yourself to somebody you don't know and get their business card. We're going to ask you that to show evidence when you come back at 11:20 in our session titled Managing Risk in a Fiscally Constrained Environment. So enjoy, everybody.